Yeah. That was the last time I was like, let's see.
Okay. I guess I gotta download a new version of this software that I've been using. How have you been? How you been doing, Cam? How's everybody been doing? I am live streaming. I just realized that. How you guys all doing? I am KingSithis. It has been a long time since I've live streamed. The main reason is just because I've been really busy. You know, I've just been really busy working. And now, but I think I'm gonna be able to stream a little bit more now that I'm making more money. So yeah.
Let's go more new streams.
Awesome.
Hell yeah. Yeah. Hopefully, this is the To AnCaps live. Hopefully, some new people come in here and debate us.
I really hope someone like Dark Karl Marx doesn't come in here.
You don't like that guy, huh?
Conversations never go anywhere. I feel like those conversations like always devolve into like retardation.
Yeah, he doesn't. He says he makes some pretty wild claims, and then just doesn't make sense. Like one time I was talking to him, and he was like, "Oh, why do you choose to be a right wing anarchist as opposed to left wing?" And I was like, "Well, that's because a lot of left wingers, they tend to support intervention in the market." And he's like what? And I was like, "Oh, well, you know, like minimum wages, and they support unions and things like that, like in terms of like having the government come in and help them." And he was acting like, oh my god, what I was saying was like the most ridiculous thing ever. It's only right wingers who support government. You know, left wingers never support government. I don't know.
That's like.
But then he was also like supporting Stalin and shit, like, and North Korea, which was like crazy shit.
Like, it's like the worst kind of communists when like, I mean, I'm not so interested in like the geopolitical or historical talk, like, because I don't really know that much about that kind of stuff. But like, it's always the worst when like the people who are at the lowest, like, they like defend like the genocides or they deny the genocides, they deny the mass killings and like the USSR. It's pretty disgusting.
Yeah.
I mean, to me, it's like Holocaust denial. Like, I think it's just disgusting.
What's going on, Sith Lord Walter White?
Nothing much. I'm just eating goldfish and drinking Coke Zero.
That's epic.
Is that your twin?
Yeah,
LOL.
it is, thank you.
All good.
I'm interested in talking about anarcho-capitalism.
Hell yeah.
Yeah. What's currently being discussed?
We were talking shit.
We weren't really talking about AnCap. We were just talking about like communists, I guess. But
okay.
We can talk about AnCap. I mean, where should we start? Like, I mean, let's just ask this. Like, what do you think? Like, do you think taxation? Like, we think taxation is theft. That's like a pretty big thing. Like, what do you think about that?
I don't think so. But
okay, I mean, then let's...
I could ask you a question.
Yeah.
Like, what is the distinction between like like a state and like any sufficiently sized corporation?
One is voluntary and the other one is not.
What do you mean one is voluntary? Like what's voluntary?
Well, voluntary means that you have a choice in the transaction. So with a corporation, you don't have to buy, or a company, you don't have to buy their stuff. You don't have to engage in transactions with them. You can go buy from competition, assuming, there's another company around. But with the state, you are forced to pay into their services regardless of whether or not you want the service or not.
Okay. Let's say that like some company, right, like buys like a huge swath of land, something comparable to some of the modern countries we like might have today, like the EU, right? Let's say to Switzerland's size of land, and then this is undeveloped land, so maybe it's on another planet and they just terraformed it, something like that, or we can imagine it's like alternate history. So buy a bunch of undeveloped land, they build a bunch of roads and public places, and then let's say people are like paying to live in this place, right? So this is like a voluntary country, right? So it's you don't have to pay taxes, you just have to pay if you want to like live there, right? Would you say this is all like fine, well and good so far?
Yeah, that's actually a kind of what we advocate for.
Yeah. And now let's say that that like you're born into this country, this corporation-owned country, right? And you grew up, and now you're like at the age where you're gonna be like independent, right? Your parents are like no longer like paying for your stuff. So in this scenario, it seems like you're sort of placed into a very similar situation to someone in like a country that's sort of run by state, because you can either continue
Actually,
paying.
let me just draw the distinction like very quickly, right?
Okay.
So this is how we're gonna understand this, right? Like, so if it's like legit, if we're imagining, right, some company, right, owns this land, right? How at least we're gonna understand that is that there's some specific person, right, who owns all the. If we're like, it would have to be some specific person, right? We believe in individual ownership, so we can say like maybe the CEO of this company, right? Let's say they're gonna own. But it's obviously a very large portion of land, right? But we can just imagine, for the sake of the scenario, this one person owns all the land, right? And in our view, they have a right to that land, right? And if you were born into this area, right, which we would view as legitimately owned, then the owner, they have the right to say, exclude you from it. Like, that means kicking you off. But the difference...
It's the same thing...
And so in our view, that's legitimate, right? But
yeah.
The difference... All right, so let me finish this. Like,
Sorry.
The difference with the state is that the state, people in the state, right, say the president or, other people in the state, they don't legitimately own these parcels of land that the government, has jurisdiction over, right? It's not like they went out and homesteaded the land or paid people to go and homestead the land, right? It's more like however many years ago, a lot of land was stolen from people by, government agents or... or I think, at least in the case of the U.S., large portions of land were bought by, the U.S. government from other countries which already didn't have a legitimate claim. Right.
Okay,
so
okay,
then the difference would just be that
if I could add in one last point,
is legitimate.
If you were born in your mother's house, that doesn't give you any more of a right to your mother's house than her, because because you're born there doesn't mean that there's something wrong going there if she tells you that you need to leave. Fundamentally, she's the owner of the house. She has the right to kick you out.
Yeah, but also it wouldn't be on the owner of this land, right? On the CEO of the company. It wouldn't be their responsibility to facilitate your leaving, right? It would be presumably, right? It's not their fault you were born into this place. You'd have to.
So it's not your fault that you were born in your mother's house, but eventually you have to leave, right? If she wants you to, right?
Yeah. So we're saying that it's reasonable, right? It's entirely justified for this company owner to say that if you're not going to pay our equivalent of taxes, I don't know, the fee, the subscription for living here, then you have to leave, and we're not going to facilitate your leaving by
Again, there's a difference between. You understand? There's a difference between rent and taxes, right?
Yeah.
Okay, one is rent, and the other one is taxes. If you were born in my house, right? Let's say your mother came over. Just say a weird scenario. Let's say your mother came over while she was pregnant, and then out of nowhere she's like, "Oh my God, I'm giving birth," and then she just has to give birth inside of my house, right? I would still have the right to tell her, all right, you've given birth, you got to get out of here. Like, I don't think you being born in someone's house or property gives you any special claim to it, right?
Yeah. No, all I'm saying is that from the perspective of the person who was born here, it's going to be like functionally identical to being born in like a state with taxes, right? Because we imagine like there's some.
Well, actually, no. Again, there's a difference. As Cam pointed out earlier, as he very intelligently pointed out, there's a difference between a state and a private company. A state, see, this is how us libertarians view property rights. You just want to get this out the way. The only way in which you could be a property owner of something is if you get it through just means, which would be through voluntary transaction or original appropriation. So, for instance, if I came up to you randomly and you're looking through your phone or something like that, and I randomly ran up to you and I snatched your phone and ran off, that would not then make me the owner of your phone because, I just snatched it and ran off just because I'm the possessor of it. It's the same thing with the state, right? The state is not the just possessor of the land. So that's why I said earlier, like I made the distinction between rent and taxes. Now you could say, if you're saying that taxes are the same as rent, well then that would mean any landlord is basically a government. But I mean, I wouldn't really consider that.
I think like
I'm saying it's functionally similar. Like, let's say if you're born in like a prison, right, or something like this. Or I mean, you can be born in like any sort of colony, and this colony was stolen by like a warlord. It's not going to matter to you whether or not they rightfully own that land because you still like have to.
Well, it matters to me. Well, actually, it does matter to me because I'm an anarcho-capitalist. Anarcho-capitalist.
I think all Sith Lord is saying is that in your eyes, right, as the person born on the land, it's going to be functionally at least similar, your situation, right, in terms of, you have to, you're either going to have to leave the property, right, or at least you're going to have to leave the land, right, or you're going to have to, say, pay in order to stay on it.
Yeah.
Well, the thing is, the difference is one person is the owner, and the other one is not. See, whether or not you have a just right to exclude anyone from any scarce resource is determined by whether or not you were the owner of that resource. The only reason why it's wrong for the state to force you to pay into taxation isn't because you were born there or because they have a right to do so. We believe that the reason why it's wrong is because they don't have a right to that land. And for them to charge us to stay on it would be a rights violation. Whereas if you do own the land, you do have a right to charge someone to stay there.
Yeah. Well, like I said, I'm not really concerned about like whether or not the state has the right to charge you things. I'm just saying that like, let's say you didn't know if you're living in a corporation-owned piece of land or like a state-owned piece of land, and I'm saying, and we can say that like the fees for living there that the corporation is going to be like exactly how taxes are done today in like Germany or something, right? It's just going to be functionally identical. But in one case, the CEO of the corporation rightfully owns the land because they bought it from someone else who also rightfully owns the land.
So you're basically saying renting and taxing is essentially the same thing.
Yeah, we're saying that like the way that the corporation is doing their rent or their subscription.
Yeah, I would have to disagree. There's one crucial difference. Voluntary. One is voluntary and one is different, and one is not.
Like it's voluntary to pay the rent, but not voluntary to pay the taxes?
Absolutely, because you don't have to stay there.
Yeah, exactly. Right. But you don't have to stay in your country either, right?
Well, it's the state is not the owner of the land. There's the crucial difference. Okay.
Yeah.
So whether or not, so I'll explain this again. So whether or not you have the right to use your cell phone, what is the one thing that determines whether or not you have the right to use your cell phone?
I suppose whether or not you own it, yeah.
Okay. So if I were to come up to your phone and snatch your cell phone from it, would I then just become the owner of that phone and have the right to force you to or charge you to use it?
Yeah, no, obviously not, but that's not what you're
okay.
I'm saying from the perspective.
So then there is a functional difference between a person who owns a phone and a person who snatches a phone and charges somebody to use it. So if I snatch your phone and charge you to use it versus me being the owner of the phone and charging you to use it, there's a functional difference between those two things because one is stolen and the other one is not, right?
What if I shoot you in the
I don't
face?
think there's a functional difference. I think there's a difference in labeling, and perhaps that's a meaningful difference. But like when it comes to if we judge what things are like justified.
So
enough,
there's no meaningful difference between stealing
Son of a
something,
bitch.
snatching something from somebody, and being the owner of something? You really don't believe that?
No, I'm saying there's no functional difference. So, for example, if you buy a phone, the phone works identically either ways, right? Like that's what I'm saying here.
Yeah, but the difference is one person stole it and the other person did it, right?
Yeah,
So
but
that's the
in the
functional
scenario-
difference, right?
Calm the fuck down, dude.
I'm calm.
I'm out.
Nobody's mad.
Mouth.
No, the guy who's like 5,000 words a second replying back to you, like,
I'm asking you,
Shit.
man, is if you take something from me and I shoot you in the face, what then?
That's not relevant to the conversation.
Yeah, sorry. I'll run by like the scenario real quick.
Something from me
So,
and I
let's
kill
say that-
you.
Okay, so you're a citizen of this corporation, and you don't know that. You don't know it's a corporation. The labels that the corporation has on everything are going to be like identical to the state. So they call their rent taxes for whatever reason, something like that, right? But they rightfully own the land. The CEO rightfully owns the land, right?
Mm-hmm.
And they have everything set up identically. And so you're born into this. You become 18 or whatever the age of consent is, and now you have to like.
I understand the scenario. Like
Yeah.
you don't have to re-explain the scenario.
What experiment? Yeah, so like, what experiment could you do to determine whether or not you're in the state or the corporation? Because from your perspective,
Well, you would have to determine.
Okay,
You would have to determine whether or not the person is the owner. That's the That's a difference that determines whether or not somebody is has a right to charge you to stay on something, or to use something that they own or not. If they are the owner, they do. If they are not the owner, then they don't. Therefore, the state is not the owner of the land, so therefore they don't have the right to charge. The state is,
Hope
the
you're doing
company
well.
is
how's streaming been
the
treating
owner of
you
the land,
lately?
so therefore they do have the right to charge. That's the functional difference.
if that's like not discoverable, let's say you track down the transactions, and you're like, okay,
Wait.
they bought it from this person, they bought it from this person, and then you get to like person 10, and
Wait,
you're like,
that is
I-
irrelevant to the conversation. You know that, right? Whether or not you can discover it or not discover it is irrelevant. There is a clear functional difference between a person who owns something and a person who does not own something. So if I come up to you and I snatch your phone and I charge somebody to use it, that's clearly functionally different from a person just letting somebody use their phone and charging them to use it.
What I mean, I don't think maybe functionally different is not the right word here, but I think
Okay, so then those are two different things, correct? It's not the same thing.
yeah, no, not identical situations, but to the person who is in that scenario, whether or not they
Well, I don't care what they think. What I care about is what is actually going on, and what is actually going on is that people are there's one person that is the owner of something, and they have the right to exclude the other person from it, right? And you agree with me on this. This is not something that we disagree with each other on. If I came up to you and snatched your phone, you would say I'm not the owner. The functional difference between the person who snatches the phone and the person and you, who is the owner, is that you're the owner and the other person is not. That's the only differentiation. If you don't believe that there's any differentiation, then you would have to basically say any person that rents or charges another person to use another scarce resource, regardless of whether they own it or don't own it, is taxing them. But then we're basically stretching the word taxing to any person, to DoorDash drivers, renters, anyone that lets someone use any scarce resource, prostitutes. Yeah.
Yeah, let's say like someone lends me their phone, and I'm going to use it, and I use it, right? That's fine. The phone functions, like from my perspective in that situation, the phone functions as normal, and then everything's normal. And then later I figure out through investigation that this person actually bought it from a person who bought it from a person who stole it from someone else. So the phone is actually not rightfully owned but by the person who gave it to me. And so, but from like if I go back to the there's no functional difference in the experience that I had when using that phone, right? It's in the same
Okay.
way.
I feel like I've explained this already. So before, okay, when you didn't know, that doesn't change the fact that you used it without another person's permission, right? Just because you didn't know, right? That doesn't change the fact that you used it with another person's permission, right?
If I'm
driving down the road and I run into somebody and I didn't see them, that doesn't change the fact that I ran them over, right?
Yeah, but I'm not sure what like.
Listen, okay, so yeah, right? Obviously, right? Yeah. Obviously, right? Okay, so if I go up to a judge and I say, well, I didn't know that I ran that person over, you're still going to be held responsible. It may be a lesser crime, but you're still going to be held responsible. And the reason why that is because fundamentally you're using or harming another person without the consent of that individual. And that's the functional difference. That's the functional difference between running somebody over when you're in the car and you're actually driving the car versus when you're, versus somebody running into a parked car, right? One person is responsible for the harm that is being done to another person, regardless of whether another other person knows or doesn't know. Doesn't change the facts of the situation.
But getting run over.
It's just a hypothetical.
Yeah. But to the person getting run over, it doesn't change the situation whether or not they're getting run over by someone intentionally, maliciously running them over from some malfunction of the software on an auto-driving car versus someone who's absent-minded, right? All three of those scenarios are going to be functionally identical to the person being run over, right? It might change their mindset on it later on.
I agree. That was my point. That was my point. My point was fundamentally you're still hitting the person, so therefore you're responsible for what they're doing. But the difference here is, if you're in a car and you drive into somebody, or like for instance, if you have your phone and I come up to you and I snatch your phone, I'm responsible for that because I chose to make that action. But let's say I use a phone and you later find out that it was somebody else's phone. Now you may not be fully responsible for the action, but you still have to give that person that phone back. That you don't just get to keep that phone now because you used it by accident. That phone belongs to the other person still. So regardless of whether you knew or doesn't change the fact of whether or not you're violating that person's rights or whether or not that person's still the owner.
Do you live in America?
Yes.
Okay. Let's and I assume that you say that the land that you live in, right, wherever you may live, is illegitimately owned by the government, right? Like the government doesn't.
Hell yeah.
Okay, cool. And like,
hey William.
Let's just assume that quite a while ago, before there was ever a government, there was like a Native American that was there, and then they set up a cabin or whatever, and they were living there, and then they died, and the government came in and took the land. But some Native American today has a letter or whatever signed from their ancestors saying I wish for my kin to have this property that I've homesteaded. Do you believe that they should have the right to come to your house and say actually, this is legitimately the original ownership was to my grandfather who passed it down to me, and therefore I should be able to take it. Would you say that in that moment you would have an obligation to hand over your house to this person here?
If they have sufficient evidence to prove that they are the legitimate owner of the house, then you would have no choice but to give it back because that belongs to them.
Are you saying they own the house, or do they own the land the house is on?
Presumably just the land. They didn't build the house. They just
they don't.
You would still own the house. You still and stuff like whatever's on that stuff that you bought, but the land itself you would have to get off. But that's assuming that they have sufficient evidence to prove that land is theirs. But the thing about that is, when it comes to things that happened 100 years ago, it's not really that easy to do. But one thing we do know for a fact is that the state did not get its land through just means, whether today or 100 years ago. The reason why that is because the function of the state is not to ask permission for the money that it gets. The function of the state is to forcefully extract wealth regardless of your permission.
Yeah, but presumably a corporation would also be forcefully extracting wealth from someone who was born in that land, unless they were to go through all the hoops in order to leave, they'd have to get a
If that was, I mean, are you talking about a person that owns the land? Are you saying, like, if I own land, you're saying, like, are you trying to make the claim that me charging somebody to stay on my land is the same as taxing them? Is that your claim now?
No, I'm just saying it doesn't matter to the person being charged.
Okay, so wait. I just want to hone in on this question real quick. So I just want a quick yes or no. So is rent the same as taxing, and if not, why?
It depends, but it can be functionally the same. Yeah.
That's
What
okay.
do you hold on?
Okay,
What do you
so
mean by
how?
functionally, then?
Yeah, how do you mean? What do you mean by that?
Yeah. So I say something is functionally the same. It just means that the recipient of whatever, the person paying rent or the person paying taxes, to them it doesn't matter whether or not it's tax or rent. Now there are cases where it does matter, where that's an meaningful distinction. But in a case like the one I described, where someone's born into the scenario and they're forced to pay this rent or get out of the country, or I don't know what the corporation-owned equivalent of the country would be, but that's
Okay.
the same to them as.
I'll give you this. I'll give you another branch. In both situations, you have to pay or get out, right? I'll give you that.
Yeah.
Right. But here's the difference.
Exactly.
Here's the difference. One person is the owner, so therefore they have the right. Therefore, I don't think they're doing anything wrong by doing so. So, for instance, if I were to go up to you and ask you for your cell phone, and you were to say, no, give me $15, I would say you are within your right to do that. I would say you are 100% within your right to do that. But if you're not, let's say you didn't own the phone. Let's say you snatched somebody's phone from their hand and you were trying to sell it to me. Hey, I got this stolen phone. I'm trying to sell it to you. I would say you're not the owner of that phone, so therefore you don't have the right to do that. And that's the difference that us libertarians hone in on.
Yeah. But if you're being forced to do something, right? Like you're forced into a situation which is rather displeasing to you.
Well, if you stab somebody, right? Yeah, you're gonna be forced to pay restitution, right? But
Yeah.
I would say that's fine because you stabbed somebody.
Yeah. Well, I mean, an example would be like, let's say someone stabbed you. It doesn't really matter if they're the legal owner of that knife or not, right? They still stabbed you. Whether if they stabbed you with like a stolen knife, maybe that's going to be like a slightly more severe punishment for them. But to you, your wound is not going to be any different from them stabbing you with a
Functionally, regardless of whether. Okay, so if you mean functionally, and then I get what you're saying. Functionally, if you stab me with a stolen knife or your own knife, it's not going to change the facts of the situation. Yeah, I get you on that. But I would say, let's change the scenario once a little bit, right? Let's say you're coming and breaking into my house. Then I would have a right to stab you, right? Now, either way, in those three scenarios, I'm still stabbing you, right? But the difference between scenario A, B, and C is the justification for the stabbing, right? So I would say the person who randomly stabbed, regardless of whether or not he had a stolen knife or not a stolen knife, that person is guilty. Whereas the person who stabbed because he was defending himself, he's not guilty because the circumstances are different. Now, the stabbing is all the same in each situation. Yeah, I'll give you that. But the justification is different.
That's due to different actions being taken on the part of the person being stabbed. If the person being stabbed, let's say scenario one is they're just stabbed by like a person in like a field, right?
Yeah.
And then scenario two, they're stabbed by a person in the field, but the person stabbing them owns the field and is stabbing them for trespassing, right? But the person being stabbed didn't know this. In this case, I would say there is no functional difference to the person being stabbed because their actions are identical. They just walked into a field.
I'm not disagreeing with you on that. I'm not disagreeing with you on that. Obviously, in all situations, everybody's getting stabbed, right?
Yeah.
In all situations, a person is getting stabbed. The difference is the justification, again. The justification is different. So, for instance, a person who's getting stabbed for going onto another person's property, versus a person who's getting stabbed randomly on a street by a mugger, yeah, both situations, they're both getting stabbed. But I would still say that the situation differentiates those two stabbings in the sense that one is justified and the other one is not. The justification is different. It's not the situation. They're both being stabbed. It's the justification that's different.
Well, so with the scenario where someone walks into a field and gets stabbed, but the stabber owns the field, is that justified? Are they justified in that?
Well, of course, because it's the same way that, like, if I came up to you and I snatched your cell phone versus you going up to me and giving me your cell phone. In both situations, I'm getting your cell phone, right? But the justification for whether or not I have the right to use a cell phone is different. It's different. Because in one situation I snatched it, and the other one you gave it to me. So the justification about whether or not I have the right to use it or not is different.
Yeah, but in both cases, the person is just walking into a field with no fences, no signage, no markings.
Again, I'm not. You're not listening to me, dude. I'm not disagreeing with you that in both situations they're being stabbed. I'm talking about the justification. The justification is different.
Okay, yeah. So if the person stabbing is justified in scenario 2, presumably that means that the
if I stab you for no reason and I stab you because they're on my land, those are two justifications, right? I have a justification for one that is different from the other one, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so you do understand that there's two different justifications for those situations, right?
But presumably, if the stabbing occurs and we're saying person who is stabbing is justified, that means that the fault of the stabbing is on the person who is being stabbed because they're
or the stabber would be at fault, and the person who's being stabbed would be not at fault.
Yeah, but we're saying the stabber has justification. Let's say the stabbing happens on private property.
Well, and if the stabber has justification, then the situation is different. Yes.
Yeah, exactly. So
like if you go to court, right? Is the judge going to go up to you and be like, oh, let's say, oh my God, judge, I got stabbed. Oh well, you just got stabbed. Who cares? I mean, either way, you got stabbed. Whether you got robbed, whether he was, in your house. Well, it's just like, wait a minute. Obviously, there's a difference between these two different situations, right? One, I was being robbed, and the other one, I just did it for no reason. So yeah, functionally, they're being stabbed, but the justification is different.
Yeah. But so what I'm saying is, if we have a stabbing scenario where the person doing the stabbing is justified because it's happening on their land and they own the land, right?
Yes.
But in both scenarios, so what this means is that the fault of the stabbing is on the person being stabbed. It is their fault they're being stabbed because it
depends on the situation. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, we're saying in this situation, it is because they're on someone else's land.
Yes.
So in this scenario, it's their fault. So I ask, if we're putting the fault of the stabbing on them, what actions could they have taken to avoid this? Because again, we're saying that the situation is someone walks into a field with no signage, no markings.
Well, under the libertarian ethic, the only time you would have the right to stab somebody is if they're willingly not leaving. So if you go up to a person and they're trespassing and then you say, hey, leave, and then they say, okay, I will leave, then you don't have a right to stab them. It's only if they say, I refuse to leave, then you have a right to stab.
If they say, I don't have sufficient evidence to believe that you rightfully own this land, so I'm not going to leave until I have that evidence.
Well, it's up to the accuser to bring forth the evidence. You can't just go up to somebody and say, so the person who is the possessor of a good is assumed to be the owner unless you have evidence that they stole it. And that goes for any situation. So for instance, I can't just go up to you and say, hey, you stole that cell phone. Well, it's just like, I'm assumed to be the owner unless you have evidence that I stole it.
Okay.
The accuser is the one that has to bring forth the evidence.
Okay, so if we say that there's a state that's possessing some land, and you haven't investigated the history of that state and how they acquired it, then it should be assumed that they're the rightful owner of that land, and you should be paying taxes or leaving.
No, because the function of the state, right? Like the whole system of the state is to force you to pay. Like for instance, if I were to ask you throughout any period of time in the United States or any government history, do you have a choice to pay taxes? The answer is always going to be no. Therefore, it is theft.
No, you do a choice. You can pay taxes or leave. That's the choice.
Again, the only way that you would have the right to kick somebody out is if they are the owner, and the state did not. Even if you took the United States, the state, we both know that the state did not homestead the land. They did not buy it using their own money. So therefore, they're not the owners.
Well, that's why I didn't say the state. I said the United States. I said any state that you have not investigated their history of, right? You just said that if the possessor of land is assumed to be the owner until you bring counter evidence, right? So, if you go to like some random state and you haven't investigated history,
well, then they wouldn't be a state. They would just be a private individual. If it's a person that is on land and you don't have evidence that they stole it, then they would just be a private individual until you do.
We could say like the president or something, right? Or the prime minister, or whatever the equivalent is.
Yeah,
right?
but the difference. Well, here's the issue. Can you name me one state that you could prove that wasn't stolen?
Well, I don't need to, because you said that the possessor is assumed to be the rightful owner until there's counter evidence.
Yeah, but I do have counter evidence. I do have evidence that the state stole the land.
Well,
I mean, just name any state, and I could give you evidence that they stole it.
Any state.
Yeah.
Any state. Okay. That's actually tough. What do you know about the history of?
Could you name any state that didn't steal its land or didn't force people to pay into its system?
Well, I mean, I'm just gonna like take you up on your offer. So, do you know like what's the history of Kazakhstan's land acquisition? How do you know that the land is stolen?
Well, did they have taxes?
Does Kazakhstan have taxes?
Yes.
I don't see that's relevant.
Well, taxation is theft.
Okay. No, because taxation isn't theft if they own the land, rightfully.
Well, how did they get the land?
Again, they're assumed to be the rightful owner unless you have counter evidence. You just said that.
Again, for fundamentally, when you trace back the evidence for, I can't really speak on Kazakhstan personally, but if I promise, I'm pretty sure that if I trace back the lineage of the people who run the state of Kazakhstan, I'm sure I could find, the fact that they either stole the land or they forcefully paid people in order to purchase the land.
But earlier you said that if you don't have sufficient like evidence to say that someone doesn't rightfully own the land, then they should be assumed to be the rightful owner if they're possessing the land. And so, presumably, the individual that's at the head of Kazakhstan is assumed to be the rightful owner.
I mean, if Kazakhstan did not violate the property rights of anyone in order to obtain the land, or the president of Kazakhstan did not violate anyone's rights in order to obtain Kazakhstan, then yeah, you would be right that they would be the owner. But I don't believe that's so.
Okay, yeah. But like, I'm just asking you for the evidence because you can say without evidence it should be assumed that.
Well, I don't know much about Kazakhstan.
Exactly. So it should be assumed that they are the owner and that they have a right to charge taxes.
I highly doubt that the people who run Kazakhstan. I highly doubt that the people who run Kazakhstan got it through their land through voluntary transaction. But maybe I'll take your word for it.
Well, I mean, no, I'm just like assuming it to be true based on what you said earlier that it should be assumed to be true.
I don't know.
Kazakhstan,
we're talking about states here.
Are we talking about the head of Kazakhstan?
Yeah, the head of state of Kazakhstan would have been the person owning the land. Presumably, it would either be that or someone very high up within the political.
So they own the whole country.
They would own the whole country, and then would be like.
How did they own the whole? How did they get to own the whole country? Did they homestead the whole country?
No. It would be passed.
Oh, so then they're not the owner.
But no, because you don't have to homestead. You can inherit land by.
Oh, so then the person that the person that they inherited it from homesteaded all of Kazakhstan.
Well, no, it would be a series of like. I mean, again, it doesn't really matter here because they're the possessors.
No, actually, it does matter. Actually, it does matter. That actually is the thing that determines whether or not you're the owner of that thing, right?
Yeah, but we're like we don't have any evidence that they didn't like achieve it through like
I mean, I don't think it would be possible for anyone to homestead a whole country.
A bunch of people homestead the land, and then through like let's say one person acquires two swaths of land through voluntary transaction.
No, and at what point did every single person in Kazakhstan unilaterally agree to then hand over their property to the people who run it now?
Well, no, it would have been a very, very slow process from like the original founding of Kazakhstan. Eventually, and again, this doesn't really matter because
I highly doubt it was voluntary.
Yeah, but like unless you have counter evidence, it should be assumed that it was that they do rightfully own that land.
Okay. Yeah, I assume that that every single transaction that the government of Kazakhstan done was done voluntarily. Yeah, of course.
Well, I mean, yeah, if you're
Sithis.
consistent with your earlier logic. Yeah, sorry.
There's a more obvious way to get out of this problem. You said being the person in possession is presumed to be the owner. Is the government of Kazakhstan in possession of most of the land in the country?
What do you mean by that? I mean, I'm not like in my like every square foot of my house most of the time. In fact, I'd say like the vast majority of the time I'm not in all of the square footage of my house. So I don't think that's really.
But you have used you
Yeah, but
bought
you
your house, right?
homesteaded it.
You homesteaded it and you purchased it from someone else, right?
Yeah, I purchased it.
Okay, so therefore,
However, you might say that actually I don't own it because I purchased it from what was the government seized someone else's house because they failed to pay taxes, and then I purchased it from the government. So you might actually say that I don't own my house, but
wow, that's kind of fucked up.
I mean, that'd be kind of complicated if you take the more Rothbardian standard. I haven't read the whole entire book. The Ethics of Liberty does a really good job addressing this kind of stuff. A really detailed explanation of like how this works. But yeah, that would be. I'm not even a libertarian myself, but I think I hold a classical liberal view, which is pretty similar. So, yeah, the thing would be that, in regards to that. So if you were to like homestead land and like be in possession of it, and like you have evidence like you were like in control of it. But like, so let me put it this way. So if the land is taken from someone, we can't find the original owner. We don't know who, or you at least don't know who the original owner is. Maybe the government has records, but you can't necessarily access them. Then you would have the obligation. Then the next person who homesteads it, who buys it or what have you, possesses it, continues to use it. They would essentially become the owner of it until you can provide even earlier and better claim that wasn't itself acquired through theft. So that would not necessarily be the case that you would lose your right to ownership of it.
But like, let's say if the original owner like surfaced out of like nowhere and was, or maybe a descendant of the original owner, and he has like a letter and then he goes like, yeah, this is my ball print here in the bathroom on the and he takes those balls and it exactly matches and he has evidence that he owns it. Then he'd have to like hand it over it.
Of course, because that fundamentally is that person's property.
Yeah. But back to the Kazakhstan bit, it seems like possession doesn't really mean like you have to be there and use it, because I don't see any problem with like, let's say you own an apartment building and you've never like even stepped into the place. You just bought it in like
Possession
a
would
business
just be
deal.
some sort of control, right?
Yeah, possession would have the yeah. It isn't
Like,
necessarily
if you have
having.
control over something, you possess it. Or,
Okay, yeah.
That's all right. I think.
Yeah. Well, the government of Kazakhstan definitely has control over the land, right? They can kick people out of their homes and stuff. They're definitely controlling the land, and so
But is it a
like, yeah?
The difference here is that if whether or not it's a just possession, and there are people who homesteaded their land or bought their land without on Kazakhstan and are being forced to pay into these Kazakhstan system even though they've homesteaded their land, and that is fundamentally theft.
Well, if they homesteaded owned land, like you can't just come into my house and like set up a tent in the
Wait,
living room.
so how did Kazakhstan? How did the government Kazakhstan homestead the whole land of Kazakhstan?
I mean, again, that's not relevant because we should.
I mean, it is relevant. It is very relevant because that determines whether or not you're the owner.
But previously you established that the burden of proof should be on you to show that they didn't, because if someone's possessing land, it should be assumed that they rightfully own that land, right?
Okay, but for somebody to own something, they have to homestead it. And if it's impossible for somebody to homestead it, so for instance, if I say I'm the owner of the moon, well, I don't really have any evidence that you haven't homesteaded the moon, but the idea of you homesteading the moon is completely impossible, so I'm not going to believe you.
That land, right?
Yeah,
but you're not like possessing the land. You don't have control of the land. If you said I.
So, for instance, if let's say there's a person who was born in Kazakhstan, they were born out in the wilderness. They know the state has never gotten anywhere near it, because this is very true. This happens all the time. and the government were to come in and force them to pay taxes, that would be a rights violation because they're forcing them to pay into a system in which they don't want to.
Okay, so again, if we have someone walk into a field, right, an unmarked field, no signs, no fences, and then some guy comes out with a shotgun and he's like, "I own this land, get out or I'm going to shoot you," and you're like, "No, I haven't seen sufficient evidence to believe that you own this land rightfully," then if we hold by this reasoning, then he shouldn't be allowed to take you out of his land until he fishes up all the documents and shows to you that he actually rightfully owns this.
No, because fundamentally,
well, I mean, if he has the right, he would have the right regardless of what he shows you.
Yeah, regardless of what evidence that you have to prove whether or not you're the owner of something, doesn't change the fact that you are the owner of something. And two, just because you walk up to somebody doesn't give you the right to take that thing from someone because you assume that they are not the owner. Whereas with the state, it's completely different because the state, we do have evidence for the most part that the state does not ask permission whenever they homestead land or not homestead land or take land or force people who own their land to pay into their system.
Well, yeah, then you'd have to have evidence that the government of Kazakhstan doesn't rightfully own the land and that they aren't just paying a fee for the citizens to use their land, that they're actually stealing and from people who stealing money from people who own the land rather than just forcing people to pay for essentially rent to use their land that the government of Kazakhstan owns.
In order for the government of Kazakhstan, the only way for the government of Kazakhstan to be right in forcing people to pay is if they homesteaded the land or got it through voluntary transaction. And I highly doubt. I don't know the history of Kazakhstan, but I highly doubt that that's the case.
Yeah. But
I was reading through it on Wikipedia, skimming it.
I mean, I was just gonna
Well, I mean, the Kazakhstan issue doesn't really matter, because, let's say you prove that they actually don't own the land. You show, this is the part where they violated my internal logic, where they didn't either go through the transaction or homesteading, then I can just point to, another obscure government, and then you have to do the same process, because it just, I just don't get having this standard of we should assume someone owns the land until we have evidence of the
mean, but you hold the standard in your day-to-day life, do you not?
Because I take ownership to be a different thing than you, right? I'm just running an internal critique.
Okay, so then from here on out, I'm just gonna take your car without your permission, and anytime that you say, "Hey, that's my car," you have to prove to me that you're the owner of that car.
Well, no, because like I said, I don't.
From your position, because what you said earlier, you're acting as if our standard of if somebody comes up to you and takes your shit, then yeah, obviously the person who's making the accusation must be the one to bring forth evidence. But you're acting as if that's ridiculous. So my thing would be okay, well then, are you saying that you could just take someone's shit without evidence? Is that is that what you think is better?
You can't universalize that rule.
Not at all. That's not what I'm saying.
Okay, so then
I think the ownership is a right that's afforded to you by the government, and then the government enforces that. So if someone takes your stuff, then you just have to go to the government and tell them, and then they will.
But who enforces when the government violates people's rights?
I don't really know what rights the government.
So let's say if the government came up to you and stabbed you, you would say, they're okay to do that. They're the government. They make the rules.
No, I wouldn't say that, actually.
Okay, so then you don't get your morality from the state.
No, I don't get my morality from the state. I get rights from the state. Rights have nothing to do with morality.
Oh, well then, okay, so then we'll go back to my earlier statement. So if the government came up to you...
That has to be addressed, though.
Yeah, so if the government came up to you and stabbed you, you would say, they have the right to do so. I may not like it, but they got the right.
No, that would not be my reaction at all. I'd say,
hold on, what do you think a right?
Huh?
Let's understand now I think we have to get into what exactly are rights. Okay, so you say rights are afforded to you by the state, right?
Yeah.
Okay, then what do you take could you give me an analysis of what you mean by rights specifically? Then do you think that's just anything afforded by the state, or does it have some
no?
There's something else to it, or
there's gonna be certain things that are sort of afforded to you by the state and then protected by the state. So it's if you have a right not to be stabbed, then if someone stabs you, What that means is that there will be consequences upon the person who stabbed you, and you will be, have your situation rectified by the state, right? So if the state like just didn't give a fuck, if people could stab you and nothing would happen, stateside, then you wouldn't have a right not to be stabbed because that's just because that's like.
Well, the right is a moral prescription. So if you're saying that somebody has a right, you're basically saying, from a moral perspective, they ought not be impeded from doing that thing. So a right is an action that ought not be impeded. So if you say the state,
I mean,
the state. Wait. So if you say that the state has or gives us our rights or tells us what rights we have, right? Then you basically would have no choice but to say, if the state says they have the right to stab me, well then I may not like it, but therefore they have the right to stab me.
If the state said that, like, one of your rights is that you can stab people, right? That's something that's protected by the state. If you're like impeded on stabbing people, then like the state will deal with that. Then the state would afford people rights to stab people. But like I said earlier, I don't take rights to have any moral prescription, right?
No, wait. We have to address that, right?
Yeah, that is some more. Yeah.
Because that's an issue, right? You already said that let me just lay this out. You agree that a rights violator, like someone who violates someone else's rights, they should be punished in some way, right?
No. I don't know what you mean by should here. Like, I don't take like a normative statement towards
like.
that.
Hold on, wait. Then what do you think should? Hold on, wait. I can't even talk about. Did you? What? Hold on. Okay, let me just lay this out. So
you don't believe in right and wrong? Is that what you're basically saying?
Sorry, what'd you say?
You don't believe in right and wrong.
Well, I mean, that's separate to this issue. I could have moral prescriptions that are not to do with rights and still have rights to be...
Okay, wait, let me...
But do you believe that a right is a moral prescription?
Sorry, what?
Do you believe that a right is a moral prescription?
No, I don't think rights afforded you by the government are a moral prescription.
So what do you think a right is?
Yeah, again, a right is going to be something that is afforded to you and protected by the government, right?
Afforded to you by the state. Okay, let me... ask you something else then, because I think we're gonna get to the root of it.
Yeah, I'm using a different definition of a right than you do.
You said earlier, Sith Lord, right? If you have a right not to be stabbed, right, and this right is can be given to you by some government, then that means if you are stabbed, right, or anyone who stabs you, there will be consequences against that person, right? Some sort of consequences.
Yeah. All it means is that if you have a right, then someone violating that right will be have consequences to be brought upon them by the government, right? Not that they should have consequences, because the right could be something absurd, like you have a right to steal other people's tacos, and the government provides...
So you're not saying you're not saying per the state's rule there should be consequences?
No, I'm saying per the state's rule we can expect consequences, not that like that's a morally good thing whether or not there are...
Well, let me ask you this. Let's say you're on an island, right, and there's no state around, and somebody stabs you. You would say you wouldn't have the right to stop that person because there's no state around.
No, I don't have a right, but I still would.
But would you be, like, in your view, would that be permissible?
I'm not sure what you mean by permissible.
Like,
I mean,
would you do you think you should be allowed to stop that person from stabbing you?
Like, by who? Like, what? Like, there's nothing.
In general.
Like, if imagine there was someone else there, right? We can just import a new person, right? We can say there's 3 people. The stabber, you who's gonna get stabbed, and this other random person, right? In this case, if you were about to get stabbed, would it be like okay for the other person to stop the stabbing?
Again,
or like
for something to be like okay or like allowed, that seems to me like there's some body that's like going to be allowing this, you know?
No, we're asking your perspective. You can have your own perspective on what's right and wrong, right?
Yeah. I mean, I don't take statements like okay or allowed to mean anything outside of the context of some third body that's like decided.
Okay, so again, that's why we're asking you. So let's say you're on an island. There's 3 people there. There's one guy trying to stab you, and there's a third guy. You say, hey, this guy's trying to stab me, and then he goes, whatever. Do you think, okay, and that guy, you try to, stop that other person from stabbing you, and that third person tries to impede you from stopping that person from stabbing you. Do you think that person...
So person three is saying that I'm not allowed to stab the person.
Or you're not allowed to stop that person from stabbing you. Do you think that person?
I'm not allowed to. Okay.
So you're saying
yeah.
there's no. You're basically saying that person,
Those persons
neither has the right or not
like,
have the right to stop that person from stabbing you.
Does person 3 have like a monopoly on violence? Like, are they like bigger and stronger than me? Presumably.
Yes.
Yeah. Then in this case, the rights being afforded by the body with a monopoly of violence would be to the person stabbing me. They have a right to stab me. Yeah, I would say they have a right.
But again, you're using rights as a purely a descriptive thing. You basically believe that might makes right.
I just identified the problem. You think that, like, okay, we've seen this before. Like, it seems like you're making a sort of might makes right claim, right? You're sort of just conflating descriptive facts. You know, like you're talking about, like, you know, in this scenario, we have this larger person, right? And you're saying, like, in this case, then they have a monopoly on violence. Whether or not they have the right to impede you from stopping the other person from stabbing you is dependent on whether they're able to.
No. They don't have rights. They afford the rights. The person with a monopoly on violence affords the rights, right? So, like, it's not that they have a right to then decide the other rights. They just do decide the other rights.
So the person who has the might decides what rights you have.
Yeah. But that's not a moral
So.
description.
Okay, but that's I understand, but that's okay, so we both agree that people who have might have the ability to force you to do what they want, right?
Yeah.
That's not right. That's not because a right is a moral prescription. You can't.
I don't think that to be true at all.
No. What you're describing is not a right. What you're describing is just what is. You're not describing a right. A right, again, as everyone uses it, a right is not a descriptive fact. A right is a moral prescription. Whether or not you have is an action as defined. No, a right is defined as an action that ought not be impeded. It is not. You can't say a person has a right and then say, "Oh, but I'm not making a moral prescription," because then that would go against the whole definition of a right. Now, you could say descriptively that a person has the physical ability to force you to do what they want. But whether or not that person has a right depends on your moral prescriptions.
I mean, yeah, like, I just don't agree. Like, you can say that I'm using an idiosyncratic definition, but, like...
No, you're not using the right definition at all. Again, a right is a moral prescription.
What makes a definition right or wrong?
Yeah, I would disagree. I don't think your definition is right or wrong. I think you're just... When we're talking about rights...
You're not using it in the normal sense of the word.
Yeah, you're saying rights are like prescriptive, like normative statements, or so they prescribe action.
I just don't. Let me just throw this out.
The definition of a right is an action that ought not be impeded, or some sort of entitlement. In order for you to say that a person has an entitlement or there's an action that ought not be impeded, you have to have some sort of moral prescription. You can't say a person has a right to something without having a moral prescription on that thing.
Yeah, I can. I can just say the right is the action that's protected by the...
okay, well then you're basically saying that if somebody who has the strength to force someone to, say, stab somebody, then they are basically saying that they have the right to stab somebody. So if somebody has the...
Hold on, then it seems like...
Wait, I want to hear an answer to that. I want to hear the answer to that. Do you... Okay, so if I came up to you and I stabbed you, I have the right to stab you. You're saying I have the right to stab you now.
Well, if we're the only two people, then you prescribe the rights, then, like, yeah.
Okay, so a rapist has a right to rape his rapist, a woman on an island.
Yeah, that's on a moral prescription. Yeah.
What does it mean for him to? It seems like you're just saying what it means to have a right is just that you're able to do something.
No, it means.
Or that like you. Hold on.
Where's my UI? Why is my UI gone?
Again, rights are things that are afforded to you and protected by whatever body has the monopoly on violence, which in most cases is the state. But
so the only thing that doesn't give a rapist the right to rape is the fact that there's somebody who's stronger that can stop them. If there wasn't somebody stronger there to stop a rapist, they would have the right to rape. From your perspective.
I mean, rights, like, they kind of don't make sense when there's only two bodies, because, like, usually you have.
I just want a quick yes or no to that question.
Yeah, sure, yeah, there's a right there.
Okay, so a person who is stronger than another person has the right to rape another person.
Yeah, that's not a moral prescription though.
Okay, got you.
Like, okay, that's not a moral prescription, but they still have a right. To me, that seems like unintelligible.
Yeah. Like you're using the word in the wrong way, respectfully.
What makes it wrong though? Like what makes the definition that I'm using?
It's generally that's the way that humans use the word right. I mean, yeah, obviously there's no objective definition to any word. Obviously people use words differently, right? From different places. But when we're talking about definitions of words, right? We're generally like when you go into dictionary, you don't hear like the definition that the dictionary wants it to be. You hear the definition that most people use. And when you're talking about rights, when you look at rights or look at a definition or any dictionary definition for rights, it's used in some sort of moral prescriptive way. You can't have a right without a moral prescription. That's just built in the definition.
Okay. I mean, yeah, this. So then, under this, rights can't be taken away. Then it's impossible for rights to be taken away.
100%. Okay. So now, but here's the thing, right? Someone can force you to do something against your will, right? But that doesn't mean you don't have that right. That right is still there. You have the right to use your body. Your right to use your body, because we believe in self-ownership, is always there. Now, someone could force you to do something against your will, obviously, but that doesn't mean you don't have the right. What's going on is that they're violating your rights. You understand now? So, for instance, with the rapist or a stabber, for instance, right? The woman or the guy who's being stabbed, those people have the right to their bodies. What's going on is the person is violating their rights. Now, you could say descriptively the person who has the strength has the ability to do what they want with the other person. Descriptively, I would agree with you on that. But if you're to say they have the right, then you're getting into dicey territory, because then you're basically insinuating that that they're doing something right there. You know what I'm saying? Like that's
no.
You know,
right as in like rights that are afforded, and right as in like what is right. I think isn't it's not.
Okay, I'm not using what is right, but right is a moral prescription, right? And what we're trying to explain to you, we're not trying to get you in a corner, but we're trying to say to you that right is a moral prescription. So to say that someone has a right to do something, you're saying that they ought not be impeded from doing something. So for somebody, like if you say I have a right to freedom of speech.
That's not what I'm saying. Like again, you can say.
No. I know that's not what you're saying, but that's the definition of right. That's the definition of a right. A definition of a right is if I say I have the right to freedom of speech, right? That would mean that if somebody were to try to impede me from talking, they would be violating my rights. So you're basically saying that you ought have the right, you ought not be impeded from doing that thing.
Look, I may not be using the common definition, but I take the common definition to be kind of like unintelligible. I don't like it. I disagree with it. I don't think that's an accurate.
But why?
Of what rights are when they're used. Okay, so I'll run through like a scenario. Rights presumably are not afforded to you by anyone, and cannot be taken away by anyone. Right? They can be violated, but you always have your rights. And like from the beginning of time, you've had your rights. Or maybe you gain certain rights when you reach certain like levels of maturity. But
I get what you're trying to say.
Yeah, whatever the case, they're not afforded to you by anyone. The question is how do we discover what rights we have?
Well, we discover it through the laws of logic. Well, I mean, we're going to be getting into a bit of moral realist territory, but essentially, you discover it through logic. Essentially, the same way we discovered math and economics and all of these other things. So we can't say.
How can math be discovered through? I mean, when you say logic, I actually want to clarify what you mean here. Do you mean like first order logic, like?
In the sense that math is something that we thought through, like it didn't just come to. It's not something that we just already knew. We had to think it through. We had to come up with the idea of pi. And the idea of pi was there, but we had to discover pi. Like we had to figure out how circles work, or and how long this is, and parallel lines and stuff like that.
Math is descriptive.
It's something that you figure out using logic, right?
Well, no, I think it's something that you figure out through I take math to be like kind of the same as language. it's a thing that is used to describe things that we observe, right? It's like language didn't emerge through logic, but it also isn't like, you know, like a material thing, right? Or it's entirely like abstract. It can be separated from the object you're talking about. And math is the same way. Like math is just a descriptive language that has then become like abstracted from that and used.
Well, yeah, but there's a wrong way to do math, whereas there's no wrong way to use language generally. Unless you're talking to another person.
Well,
well,
you can say like malformed sentence.
but well, you get what I'm trying to say. Like, there's an objectively correct way to do math, whereas like language is kind of a thing we made up.
There's a wrong way. The wrong way to do math is the exact same way as the wrong way to do language. For example, if you're looking at two cans, math is like describing the property of looking at that section of the Earth or whatever, and saying there's two cans there, right? Whereas, and with language, I could do the exact, and then the wrong way would be to say there's like three cans there, right? Because you're.
I could think you got me there, but I will say this: there is. Basically, how us libertarians view it is that basically, sheesh, do I really feel like going into argumentation ethics right now? Essentially, the idea of argumentation is that ethics is, and I'm gonna break this down very simply. Do you know what a performative contradiction is?
Not exactly, no.
So a performative contradiction would be basically one should not, like if I said one should not talk, people should not talk while also talking, right?
Okay.
I'm putting forth an idea that I'm contradicting in my actions, if that makes sense, right?
Here, I can give like a more formal definite, like an actual specific.
Yeah, please,
definition,
please.
Like when you just search performative contradiction, right? I'm just reading this out. So, a performative contradiction occurs when the content of a statement contradicts the necessary implicit assumptions made by the act of uttering it.
Yeah.
Like saying like I am dead. That's just one of the first.
Yeah. It's a contradiction that arises by stating the like whatever.
Actually, I got a paper on this.
If you say like I am dead, there's an assumption that in saying that like you are alive or something. So to say I am dead, like.
Yeah, I mean another example might be like the liar's paradox, something like that.
So I'll just read out a little bit. I'm gonna read off a little bit of my paper, okay, that I kind of that I wrote, and it's called "Can Aggression Be Justified?" So, condensed offend. I'm going to give it a bit of a definition. So, scarcity, a resource is which, when it cannot be controlled simultaneously or used in incompatible purposes. Where scarcity makes conflicts possible in the sense that I can't use the same thing as you. I can't. Me and you both can't use the same cell phone at the same time and walk away from each other. So therefore, only one of us can use that. That makes sense, right? Conflicts, mutually incompatible uses of the same scarce resource. And then there's control. There's the effective decision-making authority over how a resource is used. There's action, which is purposeful behavior aimed at a chosen end. Argumentation means the activity of our offering or relying upon reason that purports to establish the rational validity or legitimacy of a norm. Essentially, two people coming together and to try to have some sort of verbal exchange in order to determine the truth or validity of some sort of statement. That's a debate. This includes like public debate, private reasoning, or things like that. So, reasons are essentially, and justifications are the defense of the norm that is being made. So essentially, and a performative contradiction is when the action of asserting a claim presupposes the falsity of the claim, like we explained earlier. So one, justification presupposes agency and control. To justify anything, one must act, reason, deliberate, and choose. These activities require bodily control. If one body is being physically overridden, one is not reasoning as an objective agent and is being manipulated as an object. So therefore, if I go up to you and I force you to do something, you're not acting on your own, you're being forced. So when you act, you're making your own choices. So therefore, justification presupposes non-coercive control. So in order for you to justify something, you have to be non-coerced. You have to be allowed to do what you want, essentially. Aggression negates those presuppositions. Aggression consists precisely in the invasive overriding of control. Thus, aggression negates the condition required for justification. So you can't justify if you're being aggressed upon because they're forcing you. To justify aggression, one must argue, but arguing presupposes non-aggression. So in order to argue, you must presuppose not being aggressed against, and you have to basically say, I shouldn't be aggressed against in order to make this argument. So basically, if you make the argument that you should aggress against another person while using your body and engaging into a conversation with another person, you're basically trying to justify a norm that you yourself don't actually believe. Because if you didn't believe people ought to have the right to use their body, well, then you would just not use it. So the whole idea of saying that you don't have the right to use your body while using your body is a performative contradiction. Then, so essentially, to justify aggression, one must argue, but arguing presupposes non-aggression. So one relies on non-aggression to justify aggression. This is a performative contradiction. Aggression cannot be coherently justified. It is rationally indefensible.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
I mean, did you have like a? Can you put this in the slide chat? I'm not sure exactly what the contradiction is, because again, like you can just like apply different standards to other people than you do to yourself, and that like solves it.
Oh, well then here's the problem with that. I already have that. So universalization. Justification claims rational validity, not personal preferences. Norms justified through reasoning must apply universally to all relevant similar agents. Arbitrary exceptions cannot be justified. Since all participants in the argumentation in the arguments are the same body type, bodily control must apply equally. So for instance, if I were to say that this norm that I'm putting forth applies to me, but then does not apply to thee, what's then stopping that person from making that then same justification against you? If he could then make that same justification against you, then the only person who wins is the person who has right, and therefore we're back to might makes right. That's why justifications need to be universalizable, because if it only applies to you and not to other people, then other people could then use that same logic against you.
So can you lay the exact like performative contradiction here? And ideally put it in the side chat.
Okay. Give me 1 second. I'm in the middle of a video game.
Okay, that's fine. That's fine.
Yeah, I think
I would personally like slightly change it a little bit if cause I've been thinking argumentation ethics for a while, and I think a version of it works, but like I would say it's more that like it's not necessarily that it's not necessarily just the specific action being something you can't do. You can't aggress and argue at the same time, really, like not properly argue.
No, it's
like,
a justification.
Someone could object by saying, well, like you can aggress outside of the conversation. And the problem with kind of like, for example, you can't sleep and argue, but you can justify sleeping while arguing, even though you can't so be asleep and argue at the same time. However, the difference here would be that argumentation. You require norms against aggression in order for humans to be able to like interact with each other enough to argue, and that would be how I would argue it differently. That you need norms against aggression, among other things, in order to like have that work. That would be the main thing I would like argue a little differently, and then you need to like, have some kind of basically objective justification for why you can like aggress or otherwise use violence in order to make any kind of exception for that, and therefore that would basically put the burden on the person trying to argue for an exception. And you have to like obviously, go through the property rights issue and like the necessity of like resolving conflicts over scarce resources and all that. But yeah, that would
no,
be
I think you're right. I feel like you said what I said just in a different way, because I wasn't talking about I put the Google Doc in the side chat, so if you want to look at it, but there's other resources I can send you. But basically, I was saying not that the aggression is the contradiction, but the justification of the aggression because you can't justify it while engaging in argumentation, because argumentation requires the use of scarce resources, the ownership of the scarce resource that is your body, you know. And if you believe in self-ownership, yeah. No. Go ahead. I was just agreeing with you, honestly.
Yeah, I mean, the thing I understood the justification. What I'm saying is, like, for example, like if I try to if I say, for example, it's okay to sleep, or it's okay to, like, I don't know, like, for example, go on like a roller coaster where it's going so fast you can't talk. Like, while I'm arguing, I couldn't do that while arguing, for example. So is it a performative contradiction for me to justify doing that while arguing? No.
It's only the justification. It's not the aggression itself, but the justification of the aggression.
Yeah, well, similarly, it's not the sleeping or the going on the roller coaster itself. It's the justifying thing. But what I'm arguing is actually like the key difference here is not the mere fact that you can't do it while arguing, that it undermines arguing in the moment. It's actually that if you had norms where people like could like basically aggress upon each other whenever they wanted, for example, or they could make up any arbitrary exception they wanted to, whether specific individuals or specific forms of aggression, then you would have a problem insofar as that would basically undermine the very conditions needed for people to be able to argue. Because if people, for example, were operating under the mindset of, okay, I can aggress whenever I want, that's going to mean that basically, okay, you're not going to be able to trust people. If people can take your property where they want, that's going to cause similar problems. So that's the ultimate reason, like, why it's bad. And yes, this would imply more things than physical aggression as libertarians want, which is why I'm not 100% libertarian, but. That's all.
I did have something.
Close to midnight.
Also, I can't access your Google.
Can you give me a rebuttal for a sleep argument?
Yeah, but
we can't access your. Sorry.
Yeah, I'm just gonna head out. It's 2 a.m. So you guys have a great night.
I put something in the side chat if you want to.
Have a great night. The Google. The Google Doc. I don't have access to the Google Doc because it's not shared with.
Yeah, you need to change the settings or whatever so that the people with the link can view it.
Yeah, change it to like viewers have access.
Yeah, it's very important. See, I'll be happy to review it, especially if you could like put the link in like DMs.
I put the Google Doc for what I which is just saying in the side chat. So if you guys can look over it if you guys want to.
Yeah,
we're just saying we can't see it right now.
You can't see it.
You need to change the settings. So that it's like essentially so that anyone with a link can view it.
Okay, I got you.
Yeah, I've had friends edit Google Substack articles in advance.
Okay, now can you check?
Yep.
It's good. Okay.
Again.
It still says I have to request access. See one more time.
Oh yeah. Okay, got you. Never mind. There you go. I figured it out. I got it. So now try.
Okay, nice.
Yep,
Anyway,
I see it.
I'm gonna head out and go to bed, but I'll review this tomorrow.
Yeah, no problem, man. But then there's also other things that is probably better than my document that you could look through too.
Yeah.
I've read Hoppa on the subject. I'm pretty.
I'm probably gonna go to like my favorite like socialist YouTuber and be spoon fed some political opinions for a bit, and then that should solve everything.
No.
Socialism is bad.
Yes.
Yeah.
Very bad. The key thing with I'm very familiar with argumentation ethics. I've read it. I've read critiques of it. I mean, the most of the critiques people make are very like not good. Like when they say like, oh yeah, like, well you don't need every single body part. Doesn't really understand argumentation ethics. But like because even if like for example I don't need my hand to argue, if you start attacking my hand while we're arguing, that's going to cause problems. But like the issue like it'll make the conversation basically stop or basically need to stop. So that would be the thing I would say in regards to
additional supporting.
That like I would focus more on like the idea that you need to presuppose norms that apply even outside of argumentation in order to like allow the conditions for argumentation itself. That would be the focus I would have, not merely the fact that, like, for example, you have to justify things without relying on coercion.
Oh, I died.
Yeah, but like you also have to, for one thing, you also have to justify things without relying on things like bribes or like basically any kind of like financial or even social incentives. Like you can't justify something by relying upon like the threat of like, oh, I'm gonna basically make you a social pariah. That doesn't necessarily, that could be a lot broader than what you might actually have. So the key thing is more that like where it goes to the point where essentially you doing something even outside of argumentation undermines the basic conditions needed for argumentation to take place.
Yeah.
That would be what I'd focus on arguing, that is going to that is going to get you a much it's going to get you a better closer to the justifying the libertarian ethic. I don't think it actually. I think it actually gets you to a more classical liberal view. But that's a whole other topic. But yeah, in general, I've been very interested. It's argumentation ethics is one of those things where it's like I've been really interested in it for a long time, but like I heard about it years ago on TikTok, and like in somewhere around 2022, 2023, and I've been interested in it. Like initially I thought it was like ridiculous and like obviously false. Looked into it more. Eventually I was like, oh, this is actually like decent. There was one article I read that really helped me get it. That explained kind of like the philosophical background behind it. And I was like, oh, I see.
Okay, I got to the one argument that I heard that you just said, the sleep argument. If stealing in one case implies endorsing stealing in all cases, then sleeping in one case implies endorsing sleeping in all cases.
Well, that wasn't what I argued.
Huh? Oh, no. That wasn't your argument, or?
Not exactly. It's probably close, but it's not exactly what I argued.
Yeah, I had a little thing on that.
But go. I'll hear it. I'll see if it's relevant.
So essentially, I gotta find it. So the category area is like sleep is non-initiate invasive action and stealing is invasive action. The difference matters structurally. Sleep doesn't override someone else's control. It does, whereas aggression does. So it kind of treats them the same. Sleep analogy successful. If you perform an action once, then you endorse the action. It does refute the act. If you perform the action once, then you endorse it. The action universally. That's false. But there is a contradiction in saying I should sleep sometimes and not others. I should steal sometimes and not others. So, for instance, like if you basically stab somebody, and then you say, you know, I'll have the right to stab, but you don't have the right to stab. You're basically making the argument that I have the right to stab, but you don't have the right to stab, essentially. But then that falls into the issue of not having a universalizable ethic.
Yeah, that wasn't exactly what my argument was about. My argument was like obviously not. So I'm just my argument is basically that you need to like slightly revise the issue in order to like basically circumvent it. Not that it like ultimately defeats argumentation ethics, at least not entirely. The issue is basically this. Okay, so if you say for example, okay, if I were to like for example engage in aggression upon you, like when we were trying to have a dispute over like whether or not aggression is okay. If I were to engage in aggression, I couldn't. That would be an invalid way of winning the argument, and therefore I'm presupposing that basically, what's it called? Argument that I have to rely upon like non-coercive things, even outside of argumentation. That runs into the basic the reductio of like, well, if your argument is because I can't use something during argumentation, like for example, I couldn't use like sleeping contests as a way to resolve an argument, not legitimately anyway. I mean, like as like a matter of like trying to justify things, doesn't actually justify something. If we both agree to be a little different, but like in general, like if we're trying to see we can't resolve a dispute over whether or not like, I don't know, like stealing is just by like having some version of sleeping context. weird example, but like that doesn't necessarily follow that it's wrong to use sleeping contests in general. Just means you can't use it specifically to resolve debates over justification. So similarly, the issue with how do I put this? So the mere fact that you can't use aggression to resolve disputes over justification that doesn't necessarily prove that you can't use aggression to resolve other things. However, the poet would actually decide to figure out whether something is just.
Yeah, but the issue is not the physical use of aggression. The issue is the justification
of the physical use of aggression. So
yes.
Same thing with the justification of using sleeping context or what have you. So the issue would be, how do I put this? So fundamentally, however, the difference is, like, for example, if you were to have like a norm that allows you to resolve contests over, like, I don't know, who like, I don't know, what example? Like, if you allowed, like, if two people decided to agree to like do sleeping contests involve like over like who gets a book or something. If you and I both agree on like a file in a book, and like we decide, you know, who's gonna get it by like doing some kind of context of who could sleep longer or what have you, that being a norm allowing that doesn't undermine the conditions of argumentation existing, which is the key difference. Whereas like if I have a norm,
but isn't
I can just go and steal.
It's the justification though. It's the justification. It's justifying the norm. That's the contradiction.
Yeah.
The performative contradiction comes in.
Yeah, because you justifying.
I mean, it isn't the aggression itself. I mean, you can aggress all you want. It's the justification of the aggression.
Yeah. So similarly, so if I were to justify a norm saying that, like, oh yeah, like what's it called? Sleeping contests are okay outside, not as long as you don't use them to justify truth claims. That would be not inherently a performative contradiction. I'm not arguing for a norm. I'm not trying to justify a norm that undermines the very preconditions of doing argumentation. That's the distinction.
Yeah.
Whereas, like, because like, even outside, it's still even like not even outside of argumentation itself. Even if you had like some kind of rule, you can fight all you want outside of argumentation. Well, that's going to create like a situation of distrust that's not going to allow people to be able to argue. Because if you know, people are just going to can like attack you whenever they want, well, that's going to be a problem. Or if they can make up any exceptions they want, like you need to have some kind of principled ground for objections. That's going to create a huge problem for the fact that, well, now you need to have a principled ground. You can't just make one up. So what is the principled ground for why it's okay to attack people in this situation and not that situation? That's going to be a huge issue for the person who just supports kind of like even more respectable versions of, or socially acceptable versions of, aggression's okay in these situations. That's going to be the issue. That'd be how I would ultimately try to defend a version of argumentation ethics. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes sense. But anyways, I'm gonna head to bed because I'm getting kind of tired. So have a good night, guys.
You as well.
It was fun.
Definitely. I'll look over your article.